VisionCon in 2011, surrounded by costumes, crowds, and a rare taste of freedom, Gypsy Rose met someone who made escape feel possible. For the first time, she imagined a life beyond the wheelchair, beyond the lies, and beyond Dee Dee. But her freedom only lasted a few hours. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Alcatraz and we're currently doing a Gypsy Rose Blanchard series, the Twisted Case Files of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and this is part 6. So we're going to go over the Dan Glidewell of it all today, and we're here. It's taken 6 episodes, but to me this is really important because I think this is where the resentment, in my opinion, starts to build towards Dee Dee from Gypsy. Last video we went through Hurricane Katrina and then moved to Aurora, Missouri, then in 2007 finally settling in their pink home that was built by Habitat for Humanity, and it was adapted to fit Gypsy's medical issues with a wheelchair ramp and a jacuzzi bath for Gypsy's muscles. Now, I went through the requirements for Habitat in my last video, and afterwards I thought about it and realised even without Gypsy's medical treatments they would have qualified. I believe there is a narrative that Dee Dee conned Habitat for Humanity to give them a house, which I guess to some extent you could say because she was presenting Gypsy as ill. But if Gypsy didn't have medical issues, they would have still been eligible for the Habitat house. Gypsy's medical conditions would have given them priority, however, so would being disaster victims and Dee Dee being a single parent. The jury's out for me, but I just wanted to highlight this because from the requirements it looks like they would have been accepted even without Gypsy's medical issues. Now, before we get into the Dan Glidewell of it all, there's some things I want to go over, and there's no specific date I could find for this, but somewhere between 2005 and 2007 it's believed that Gypsy's dental extractions took place, and this is an important part of the story. Gypsy claims her mother manipulated medical professionals to have all of her healthy teeth pulled, and this affected her self-esteem. And this is where I do empathise with Gypsy here, because overall I don't agree with what she did to her mother, and overall I don't believe her story that she's telling. However, there are times where I feel empathy for her because whatever reason she got her teeth removed, being a teenager and having your front teeth removed, I can see how that would really affect your self-esteem. But what's the truth? Did Dee Dee just remove perfectly healthy teeth? No. Way back to Gypsy's childhood, you can tell her teeth are not completely healthy. We can see that in pictures, and this isn't to be mean, you can just see in pictures they don't look like healthy teeth. But also Gypsy's narrative shifts over time, as then we acknowledge the teeth weren't healthy and they actually rotted due to Tegretol, which is a seizure medication. So Gypsy realised from her medical records that Dee Dee didn't just have healthy teeth pulled, so she needed another reason, and she said that she was given Tegretol, which eventually made her teeth rot. Now, Tegretol is an anticonvulsant drug and an analgesic drug used to control seizures and has some other uses as well, such as pain management. Tegretol is not known to rot teeth, but it can contribute to tooth loss with some of the side effects it has. So a common side effect is dry mouth, and a dry mouth means less saliva, meaning more bacteria and faster tooth decay. This is the most common side effect linked to tooth rot and Tegretol. We'll come back to this in a second though. Other rarer side effects are reported, like gum overgrowth, which can trap plaque, making cleaning harder, indirectly linking this to tooth decay. Even rarer, Tegretol can occasionally suppress the immune system, making gum infections more likely, and although it can't rot teeth, it can worsen oral health. Tegretol does not chemically erode enamel, it does not directly cause teeth to fall out, and does not cause rapid decay on its own. If someone who takes Tegretol is seeing fast tooth decay, it usually points to another factor, such as dry mouth, from the medication or other reasons, high sugar intake, acid reflux, poor brushing, other medication taken at the same time, and underlying dental disease. So let's start with the dry mouth. Gypsy, when she was a child, she had pooling saliva in her mouth and doctors surgically removed some of her salivary glands. She still has some, but just less. And they tried other treatments such as Botox before the last resort of having the surgery. Gypsy claims this was her mother inducing the drooling by using Oragel on her gums. But this has since been debunked. Using too much Oragel can actually be dangerous and can cause a condition called methemoglobinemia, which would cause Gypsy more issues as this can cause hypoxia, which is lack of oxygen, and if untreated, death. Furthermore, the effects of Oragel, which is benzocaine, wear off within 5 to 20 minutes if not in injection form. So Dee Dee would have had to keep reapplying with no one noticing whilst Gypsy was having tests, which confirmed the pooling of saliva. However, once the salivary glands were removed, a side effect of the surgery, even when you had hypersalivation prior, is a dry mouth. In my opinion, I believe to this day Gypsy has a dry mouth. Others dispute this and say that she actually still has hypersalivation. However, I have first-hand experience and I'll go into that in a minute. Gypsy has a tongue thrust and constantly licks her lips, clears her throat and swallows whilst talking. People have said this is due to excessive saliva, but I don't think so. I have a condition that has temporarily paralysed half of my salivary glands and I suffer with dry mouth. I didn't have hypersalivation beforehand, but now I do get a dry mouth. And I have developed licking my lips constantly, subconsciously doing it because my mouth is so dry. And because I followed this case, I would catch myself doing it and it would remind me of Gypsy. Now, the same condition for me also means that half of my mouth was paralysed, but it's gotten a lot better. However, the lower side of one side of my mouth is still very weak, which means when my mouth isn't dry, I can drool out of that side of my mouth. So although when I drool, I also do lick my lips to manage this. And like I said, I only drool because of the mouth issue, and Gypsy doesn't have that. So I don't know if an excess of saliva would still be making her drool and she would need to lick her lips to manage this. But also what we hear when Gypsy is talking is mouth clicking sounds. Which again I have when my mouth gets very dry. So to me and through my experience, it's my opinion that her mouth is dry. Now this could be from the surgery she has, and this doesn't mean the surgery was unnecessary. It can literally just be a side effect of the procedure. And this is another time that I feel bad for her because I have this dry mouth and it's a daily annoyance, and this should hopefully be temporary. But for her this will be permanent and something she needs to live with, and it would still be annoying to live with. Whether she needed the surgery or not, you know, I do believe she needed the surgery, but it would still be annoying to live with, so I empathise with her. But I just wanted to go through that because I've heard a lot of people say it's due to hypersalivation. Going back to the list I mentioned about seeing fast tooth decay, acid reflux is on there, and we know that Gypsy also did suffer with this in her childhood, and she would vomit quite frequently, so this could be part of the reason why her teeth rotted away. The Tegretol use could have added to her dry mouth, but to our knowledge, Gypsy no longer takes Tegretol and still has a dry mouth. So if it did cause her dry mouth, it just added to a problem she already had. And this is important because Gypsy said that because of the Tegretol, her teeth rotted.
And so they started giving you Tegretol, and it caused your teeth to crumble.
Yes, sir.
And she didn't need the Tegretol because she never had seizures, meaning her teeth rotted because she was on an unnecessary medication given by her mother. However, Gypsy actually did have an abnormal EEG in the medical record, so whether she actually ever had seizures is unknown because Dee Dee most likely would have been the only one to witness them. But I know that Tegretol can also be used to prevent seizures, so is it possible that from an abnormal EEG that she was given Tegretol? Dee Dee could have witnessed some seizures, we just don't know. So it's really difficult when there's so much information missing and we only have one person's account. We only have Gypsy's word, and when there's so many inconsistencies, we can't rely on that. There are also questions of whether Gypsy was actually taking the Tegretol or not, so I don't know if she had it when she was younger and stopped taking it, or if she just never took it in the first place. The case is just so confusing, but what I can surmise from all of this is that Gypsy still to this day has a dry mouth, which most likely accelerated tooth decay and caused poor dental hygiene. In addition to this, Gypsy talks about still using a baby bottle to drink Pediasure, much into her adulthood. She said it was a comfort to her, and she blamed Dee Dee for this and argued that she should have weaned her off, and I do agree with her here. To a certain point, Dee Dee should have stopped this, no matter if Gypsy enjoyed doing it or it comforted her. It's like weaning a baby off a dummy. They don't like it when it's first taken away, but you need to do it, otherwise it will be much harder to wean them off later in life. They could be made fun of, they could have issues with their teeth. You know, the parent should step in and wean their child away from these things. And I also believe at a certain point Gypsy could have weaned herself off of it as well. She was a fully grown woman. She knew it wasn't normal, and we can see this when she tells Nick Godejohn, and presented it as some sort of secret, so I believe she probably was ashamed of it. She knew enough about, you know, general society to know that this wasn't the norm, and I'm talking about this in relation to her teeth, as sucking a baby bottle can cause what's called bottle or milk rot, which can cause decay and damage to teeth. Not to mention Pediasure is sugary, so I don't believe it was any one thing. I think it was an accumulation of poor dental hygiene, sugary drink / food, dry mouth, and drinking from a baby bottle. It wasn't any one thing, and it certainly wasn't a manipulation from Dee Dee just telling them to take the teeth out. I also find her teeth removal very interesting because, as I said, I think any teenager would be upset about this, and Gypsy said she was. One of the first things she did coming out of prison was getting her teeth done. And typical Gypsy and her grifting ways, she wanted the doctors or dentists who extracted her teeth to give her compensation to actually pay to get new teeth, because she still believed that they were perfectly healthy teeth, or that her mother gave her Tegretol, which then rotted away her teeth. But if you're going with the fact that your mother gave you unnecessary medication, so just stay with me because this is what Gypsy says. Her mother gave her unnecessary medication, which meant her teeth rotted. So the dentist who took out those rotted teeth need to pay for you to have more teeth? Like, that argument only works if we're going with the fact that Dee Dee manipulated them to take out perfectly healthy teeth, but you've already admitted that they weren't healthy because of the Tegretol, in which case the dentist wouldn't be liable for taking them out because all they see in front of them is rotted teeth, no matter what the cause is. But anyway, she got them taken out, and we can see that it definitely was an insecurity for her. However, in pictures before the crime, when she is out in public, she doesn't wear her dentures, which we know she did have her dentures. We can see from the video she sent to Nick before the crime, she had them in. But in public, she didn't wear them, and in pictures, she made sure to smile big so you could see her missing teeth. And I wonder why she was out, and I wonder why she was smiling this way if it's such a big insecurity for her, because usually I know when people are self-conscious of their teeth, they might smile with a closed mouth, but Gypsy was just out here with a wild smile, showing off the gaps in her teeth, and yes, I guess you could say Dee Dee taught her to do that to make people see her as younger than she was. What I do find interesting is Gypsy definitely knew that this was part of a way to make people feel sorry for her, and we can see this in the interrogation room when Gypsy is trying to cry and appear sympathetic to the officers, but when that doesn't work, she then takes out her teeth. So I think she was definitely aware of how to manipulate people, how to gain sympathy, and yes, she probably did learn this from Dee Dee, which again, terrible example to set your child. But Gypsy's story is she just didn't know anything that was going on. She didn't know that her mother used her as a cash cow. She didn't know of the deception. She believed she was really ill. I think if that was the case, then we would see Gypsy smiling with a closed mouth smile because she would be so embarrassed and ashamed of her teeth. However, I think Gypsy was quite comfortable playing the role of a disabled child, and she knew what to do to make herself look the part.
They have these huge buggies. So say if I was to get inside the buggy and you push the buggy and just make up a story like I'm your handicapped sister or whatever, and you just put me in the buggy because I'm small for my age. So I could easily look 12 or 13 to make it easier. And so here we are going down the aisles, and I always like to have something put on top of me, something big like a pillow or something, so the cameras won't catch what I'm doing. And I'll probably have a dress or something on, and I just take like movies, DVDs, and I just slip them under my dress, and we might buy like a soda or just some cheap item to say we bought something, and then we just walk right out.
Okay, so we've spent a fair bit of time on the teeth, so let's move on to Gypsy's age. Prior to Katrina, there are a few instances we know of that Dee Dee would change Gypsy's age when she was around 7 or 8 to a year or so younger. This coincided to when Gypsy was queen for a day at a parade in Louisiana, so it could have been certain charities had an age limit or something, and Dee Dee would change Gypsy's age to reap the benefits, almost like when children eat free at a restaurant and your mum tells you to say you're a different age than you were. Is it right? No. However, is this for Dee Dee's own gain, or is this Dee Dee doing this to get Gypsy things? After Katrina, this behaviour seems to escalate further, and moving to a new place and documents being lost in Katrina made it easy to do this, so Dee Dee routinely claimed Gypsy was quite a few years younger than she was, and she was claiming she was 10 to 12 years old when she was actually 14 to 18. Again, is it because children's charities were giving them more? Also, I know that Dee Dee would claim that Gypsy didn't have long to live, so was this a way of kind of prolonging that? I don't know. What we do know is that Gypsy's Medicaid card had her real birth year on, which was 1991, but in other places Dee Dee would claim that it was 1995.
And your date of birth, Gypsy?
Is 7/27, 1995. On here they have 91 because it's a long story, but
okay, sure.
Me and my mother are Hurricane Katrina survivors.
Okay.
And my birth certificate was washed away in Katrina.
Okay.
And unfortunately, they messed up a long time when they messed up the paperwork, and it said 1991, but it's actually 95.
Okay. And that puts you at how old then?
I would be really 19, but on here it's my Medicaid. My medical insurance has 23.
Okay. All right. So how old actually are you? Let's get
19.
19. Okay.
It's all screwed.
Yeah.
I don't know if Dee Dee was doing it to con the doctors as much as she was doing it to con the charities. So now we've reached the part of the story where Dan Glidewell enters the chat. 2011 is a pivotal year in this case. Gypsy is 19, but Dee Dee was claiming she was actually 15. Gypsy in this year on March the 2nd was also diagnosed with her real medical condition, microdeletion 1q21.1, which was previously unknown and undiagnosed, and its symptoms seemed to line up with the ailments Dee Dee claimed Gypsy had. We went over this in part 3 of the timeline. So Dee Dee finally got her answers and didn't pursue further testing, didn't seek attention for this disorder, said her daughter was stable. So if Dee Dee had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, she didn't do what would be expected of her. A mother with Munchausen by proxy whose daughter then gets diagnosed with a rare medical condition which can cause a whole array of symptoms, she didn't take advantage of this. Was it because she actually didn't have Munchausen by proxy and was malingering and had already got help from charities and was financially stable and in the Habitat House, so didn't need to do as much fundraising? I don't know, but it certainly feels like it doesn't fit the pattern of Munchausen by proxy. This is the year that Gypsy also claimed her mum found out she could walk when she ran away with Dan Glidewell, which we're going to go over in a minute.
I wouldn't be able to walk, that I was paralyzed permanently. And that part, like the part that I had a seizure was true. In surgery, I had the seizure and I was paralyzed. But what they didn't know is that it was temporary paralysis and not permanent. And by the time I started to get my feeling back in my legs, and I hadn't tried to walk then, but I was too young and I just kept to myself. And throughout the years, I tried to tell my mom a few times, and I guess I was just afraid of her not loving me as much as she does if I couldn't walk. You know, I didn't want to make her sad or lose any love from her. I guess that's the reason why I kept it a secret from her. And so I just kept it to myself for a long time until 2011, whenever I sort of started rebelling as a teenager and ran away from home. Ran away from home.
But I'm just thinking, did her fundraising calm down and her hospital visits calm down because Dee Dee was so mortified? Dee Dee found out that Gypsy had been lying all these years. If that video is true and Dee Dee generally didn't know that Gypsy could walk all that time, imagine finding that out and then thinking, we have scammed a lot of people, and you might just be so mortified. And I know that in the prison documents, Dee Dee was planning a move to Alaska, and I think a lot of us assumed, oh, she's planning to move to Alaska to isolate Gypsy further and get away from people that they know so they could start over again, start the scam again, and get more from charities. However, that never transpired, and I think a lot of us thought it was due to Dee Dee's poor health at the end, but I'm also thinking maybe she was planning the move to Alaska to just get away from everything. You know, I can imagine if she didn't know that Gypsy could walk and then she found that out, she would kind of live in fear that people were going to find out, because I don't even know how you would explain that my child, who's actually 19, has been pretending for many years not to walk and I didn't know. Like, I don't know how you would even deal with that. So I don't know if she just wanted to get away to start afresh so they didn't have to live the lie. I don't know, that's just all my speculation, but I just think it's important that this is the same year that that video relates to. So the Dan Glidewell saga. Gypsy loved dressing up. We can see this through her videos to Nick, but it's also reported she loved dressing up like a Disney princess in public. She loved fantasies and cosplay, so VisionCon was a perfect place for her to go. VisionCon is Southwest Missouri's premier pop culture convention. It's like Comic-Con, people go and dress up. Gypsy attended a VisionCon event in 2011 with Dee Dee. She said a man dressed as Wolverine bumped into her wheelchair and they got to chatting. The man was called Dan Glidewell and he was 36 and on parole. Gypsy later added him on Facebook, and I side-eyed Dan Glidewell for this, I'm not gonna lie, because Gypsy, yes, technically was 19, but she was known in the community as a 15-year-old disabled girl, and even if Dan didn't know that, this would be how she looked at VisionCon. And how she would act, we know, was extremely childlike in public. So Gypsy did tell Dan she was really 19 over Facebook, and the pair start chatting and video chatting, and Gypsy also tells him, I can actually walk. In testimony during Nick Godejohn's later trial after the crime, Dan confirms Gypsy introduced him to Power Exchange role-playing, and that's an important detail for probably the next part where we're going to look into that. Gypsy would send him videos of her dressed up and playing different characters, and they both partook in mutual masturbation in these videos. So their conversations were sexual, but Gypsy romanticised this relationship and she believed Dan was her Prince Charming. Now, this is such a pattern for Gypsy. She believes every man is her Prince Charming, and Gypsy was obsessed with Disney and likes to imagine herself as a princess, being kept away from the world from her wicked mother, and wanted a man to come and whisk her away, saving her. And it's important to note that Dan was not the only man she connected with. Gypsy later in prison email states that, starting in 2011, on a secret Facebook account, she met many men online, confessing her undying love to each and every one of them. She met someone as old as 50 called Richard Keene. However, her mother caught her using Facebook on her laptop and doing this, and supposedly Dee Dee called Richard, telling him she was going to call the police as Gypsy is underage, and Richard then never spoke to her again. And I know Gypsy is 19 here, and I don't have a child, so I don't know, but I can speak for how my mum would have reacted to this, and considering how Gypsy portrayed herself, like, you know, as just any other 19-year-old, my mum probably would have freaked out if I was talking to a 50-year-old man over Facebook. But especially if I looked and acted in public how Gypsy looked and acted, because Gypsy might think this is appropriate, but any man attracted to her at that time, I side-eye them. And I'm sure Dee Dee thought, this is odd. This is odd that this 50-year-old man wants to talk to my 19-year-old daughter, who, yes, is 19, but presents as a lot younger. It's just sketchy. Her real obsession at this time is Dan Glidewell, and one night Dan got into a fight and ended up at A&E. He supposedly texts Gypsy on Dee Dee's phone, which I was surprised at. Like, if Dee Dee is such a tyrant, he had other ways of contacting Gypsy privately. This seems very risky, but he tells Gypsy he's in hospital, and she wastes no time in getting a wig on, picking up a sippy cup, a Disney DVD, her baby bottle, and made sure to take her favourite nipples to said baby bottle, stolen lingerie, and stolen oxycodone, which was stolen from Dee Dee. She met Dan at the hospital and apparently got there by knocking on a neighbour's door asking for a lift. She met him at the hospital and went back to Dan's. Gypsy said they were caught by her mother. She was tipped off by friends of Dan's. Because VisionCon was in that area and Dee Dee and Gypsy would go, Dee Dee knew people who knew Dan and his people. So word got back to Dee Dee and Dan's roommates were weirded out by her. They thought she was obsessed with Dan, this is Gypsy, and he wasn't interested in that type of relationship with her because allegedly he was a player. And how she looked, they were concerned of her age, so contacted Dee Dee, who went to collect Gypsy, and the two broke out in a big argument. Friends of Dan said it was like a teenager rebelling against a parent. I guess my thing is it doesn't come across as Gypsy is scared of Dee Dee. She's really trying to test the limits here. Also, I know that she went to the hospital with loads of different IDs, kind of showing that she was 19 and of age. I'm guessing to show to Dan Glidewell to give him the green light? I don't really understand, but she had access to all these different IDs. And yeah, Dee Dee basically turned up. They had an argument, but Dee Dee said, if you come back with me, I'll let you date him. But from this incident, I feel like Dan just really was weirded out because Gypsy thought that Dan was going to whisk her away to a family farm in Arkansas and she could restart her life.
Told him vaguely about what was going on at home. And he told me, you just pack your stuff and you can come live with me in Arkansas.
But like I said, Dan just wasn't that serious about her. I think Dan just wanted what he wanted. And Gypsy really was hung up on him and it just wasn't reciprocated. So this didn't really go anywhere, and I think their relationship just kind of fizzled out. So Gypsy's account of what happened when she gets home is that her mother tied her to the bed with a dog leash for days. Dee Dee withheld food and medication and supposedly put a cow's tongue, a picture of Dan and Gypsy's period blood in a mason jar, saying this was a curse and meant Gypsy and Dan would never be together. Gypsy has said in prison through email she wanted to go back and dig up this mason jar as it was buried in the garden of their pink habitat house. Yet that would be highly inappropriate for the current owners, so I don't think she would ever actually do it. And I'm unsure of the whole event, I'll be honest, because we haven't seen that proof, and I don't want her to go and dig that up because, like I said, it's just inappropriate for the new owners having her show up and dig up a mason jar with this curse in it. But I really feel like it just seems very far-fetched. Like, where did Dee Dee get the period blood? And it just seems a bit too theatrical. I don't know. Jury's out on that one. It's just what she claims. I don't know. There was also no large dog leash or restraints in the property found in the crime scene pictures. Obviously the crime happened later, so I guess they could have got rid of them, but also the curse sounds rather extreme. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on this whole incident because Gypsy exaggerates her stories, so I don't know what the truth is, and when there's not enough information or evidence that's clear cut, I just can't go on the claims of a murderer about their victim when it's self-beneficial to them to make that person look as worst as possible. I just can't go off their word. Shortly after this runaway attempt, and look, I don't really see it as a real runaway attempt, I'll be honest, in my opinion. This is the only time she attempted to run away, and I think it's important to discuss. As part of the rationale for murdering her mother was because she had tried to run away before and it was unsuccessful, so when she says that, she's talking about this runaway attempt to Dan. So Gypsy says that she was planning to run away with Dan and go to Arkansas, but it seems the actual attempt was very impulsive. Gypsy wanted a relationship as she was getting older. As she said in the email, she was corresponding with men, telling them all she loved them, but Dan was her obsession. So when Dan was in hospital, beat up and texted Gypsy, and we don't know if this was an invitation or Gypsy just took it as an invitation, but she impulsively left, and I would assume that the medication stolen could have been to give to Dan, although Gypsy does claim she had a drug addiction, but that comes in a later part, so I guess it could be for them both. But she impulsively left with a bag of not really many things or useful things and was able to easily get a lift to the hospital, and then went back to Dan's where it was his housemates that ratted her out to Dee Dee. If she can do this on a whim, she could have planned a much better attempt and actually got away. I don't think she was really serious about running away at this point. I think she more wanted to send a message to her mother. She left Dee Dee a note which alerted her that she was gone, and maybe it was a way to tell Dee Dee, you need to give me more freedom and let me do what I want, or I'm going. We're going to end it there today, and when we come back next time, we'll be getting into the Nick Godejohn era. So if you're interested in that, if you're enjoying the series so far, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the case. I'd love for you to tell me anything I've missed out so I can put it in a later part. As I said in part 1, we're just going through the timeline in chronological order of what we knew then and what we know now, so we can get something in a chronological, sensible timeline. And we're just going through bits of information, and I'm giving my opinion because, you know, I'm interested in the case like many others, so I would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I hope to see you on the next one. Stay safe, and I'll see you there. Bye!